I'm Jack Lawton. I'm the data science principal at Aiimi, and I'm here to talk about two hackathons which we ran at the back end of last year, as described by Paul. So I'm going to run through who we are as Aiimi, what is a data hack, or what our concept of a data hack is, how we run it, what challenges we have with this, before going into a little bit more detail on both the consumption hack and the Mission Zero hack. So Aiimi at a glance, I do apologise, I think this is a couple of years old, but we're approximately 100 strong consultancy based out of Milton Keynes. We do a lot of work within the water sector, but also more broadly, we consult technically across a range of different clients and sectors. So what is a data hack? Hopefully I'm largely preaching to the converted here, but I've got a definition of a hackathon off the internet. The big difference between a sort of a regular hack and a data hack is that with data hack, we're explicitly using data to solve the problem. So there's a big technical element to it, and it does pay to have more technically minded people in your team, as well as of course the more creative and business focused side as well, which are all important pieces of the puzzle, sort of come together in a tent. So typically we do run these in a tent. Of course, with Northumbrian Water, we would run them in a lovely tent up in Newcastle, although this year they have been virtual tents. Every hack has a challenge statement. So that challenge statement might be something like helping customers to save water and money, or how to decarbonise the operational fleet by 2027, which are two of the example challenge statements from the hacks I'm going to be talking about. We always try and get lightning speakers in. So lightning speakers being external guest speakers that come in to talk to the whole tent. These are great for sort of being sources of inspiration, helping people to get in the right headspace for the problem, which might actually be in a business area they're not familiar with. It could be from anywhere. We often, particularly for Northumbrian Water Festival, we tend to get a lot of university students and things like that taking part in these. So, for example, for the Northumbrian Water Mission Zero hack, we were lucky enough to be able to get in the head of external affairs for Nissan, as well as the managing director for CNG Services, who provide compressed natural gas vehicles. So it was an interesting contrast to where your head might automatically go with electric vehicles for a carbon reducing hack. And then, of course, throughout the entire hack, we always have on-hand subject matter experts. So those are both from the business, so the water company that we may be running the hack with, but we also provide data and visualization consultants, sort of an expert bench. Sometimes it's a physical bench. Obviously, more recently, it's been a virtual bench. It's kind of been a Zoom call, and people have been able to drop in and drop off to get the wisdom of experts. So in terms of the team process, again, hopefully I'm preaching to the converted. The teams break out, explore ideas, choose an idea they want to develop, but then obviously this being a data hack, go away, create a prototype to actually present back. That can be anything from just some wireframes right through to maybe a machine learning model, some graphs, something like that. It really does depend on the nature of the problem and the team that are tackling it, what approach they take. Of course, they present back, and we typically have a panel of judges from the business who are really looking for something actionable, something which really relates to their business area, something which they didn't know, or ideas they hadn't had. So, of course, data hacks aren't without their challenges, some of them specific to the sort of remote environment we find ourselves in, and some of them not. So obviously the big elephant in the room, remote working. How do you actually make something which traditionally you would be all sat around a tent together with a big table, post-it notes, drawing pictures, sketches, make that work remotely? And specifically with a data hack, how do you actually get the data to people in a timely manner, especially when it can be quite large? So with remote working, obviously there are many different tools out there, as I'm sure we've all used, but I would take this opportunity to mention Miro, which is a great collaboration tool which we found really useful for running these type of hacks. It's kind of a collaborative post-it note, thought cloud tool, really useful. You can have everybody on the same shared Miro board, sharing ideas and collaborating. So we found that really useful to run alongside these. In terms of data access, it's really just important to be on top of that, make sure that the data is available timely and well documented to the customers. So we typically use Microsoft Azure to provide it, make sure that everybody can download the data in good time, and actually using Azure, you can use something called Azure Storage Explorer, which makes it easy for everyone to actually not only consume the data, but share data back. We found it great for sharing presentations and things like that. So jumping into the hacks, the water consumption hack was one that we ran back in August. Feels like forever ago, but it all comes flooding back to you. So we actually had 5 tents for this one because we were running it in collaboration with SES Water, Welsh Water and Anglian Water. So those 5 tents were looking at all different topics. Obviously, there's a lot to cover and there was a lot of fantastic ideas that came out of this. But I am rather selfishly going to dive into topic tent 3, which was the tent that I was actually part of for this hack, so I'm familiar with it. So the problem statement for topic tent 3 was helping customers to save water and money. And this really focused around the reduction of per capita consumption. So again, I'm going to be a little bit selfish and go for the runner-up of tent 3, which was the project that I was on. So again, I know a lot about it. But this is an interesting one because although it didn't actually win the topic tent, this was an idea that Welsh Water went and ran with and started looking at how to make it a reality. So I think it's a great example of, even though this isn't actually the standout breakout idea from the tent, is one that did go on to make a difference. So it really shows the value of these hacks, even if you don't just focus on the winning and the losing part of it, is actually getting everybody together and coming up with these ideas. So this was an app aimed at school kids. The idea was basically because Welsh Water have so few metered properties, financial incentives to actually reduce your per capita consumption don't really work for Welsh Water. So it was about trying to engage with schools and building on their existing school engagement programs, sort of pit schools against each other and have little competitions and things like that. It went quite well, but it did not win the overall hack. The winners were in Royal Flush, which is a fantastic collaboration team with Badger Meter, Metafused, Vitens, which is a Dutch water company, and Anglian Water. And they came up with the idea of this Pipe Dream app. So the idea was that this would actually be targeted at the bill payer for reducing your bill where that's possible. And the real sort of differentiating factor about this one was they used machine learning. So they looked at user profiles, consumption habits, and used that to be able to give customers a bespoke target for what they could reduce their water consumption to, tailored to them, to make those savings more achievable. I'm going to jump across to tent 1 now, and the reason I'm going to jump across to tent 1 is because tent 1 was the tent where the overall winners for the consumption hackathon came from. So it's hopefully an interesting project to share with you. So the challenge statement for topic tent 1 was how to improve the water balance calculation. So actually, when you're looking at that night line, how can you be sure that a change in the night line is actually due to leakage or if it's due to changes in customer behavior? So the approach that the RPS team took, which won this, was using machine learning and using smart meter data. So what they actually did was they combined smart meter data, weather data, and demographic information. So what you can do is you can have a look at the different consumption groups defined by demographics, look at the smart meter data that you do have for households in that group that are on smart meters, and combine that with the weather data using a machine learning model to actually create what they've called an adjustment function. So you can work out, based on changes in the weather, be that forecast or historical, what the changes in consumption might be for that consumption group, that demographic profile. And then what you can do is you can roll that out across the unmeasured properties and work out for an entire DMA how much consumption, or critically, I suppose, what the change in that consumption would be. And RPS were able to demonstrate that actually you could plot this up against the night line and show that by using the machine learning on the smart meter data, the weather data, you could show when a change in the night line was due to a change in genuine customer behavior, consumption, or due to, something else, which could well be leakage. So this helps to get rule out a few events on the night line and get a better grasp of it, which obviously impressed the judges. So moving on to the next hack. So this was Mission Zero. So this is one that happened at the Northumbrian Water Innovation Festival. So usually in a field in Newcastle, today on the internet. And I think we managed to keep the same spirit there, though I did miss the Aiimi ice cream that we usually offer if anyone's been to our tent at one of the festivals before. So the problem statement for this one was how to decarbonise the operational fleet by 2027. So for those of you who don't know, Northumbrian Water have set themselves the target of becoming carbon neutral by 2027, which is a little ahead of the wider water industry target. And obviously, a major part of that is reducing the carbon from their fleet. So that's what this hack was looking at. And I'm going to take you through the results or the outcomes of that hack through the different awards that were given for that hack. So this hack had a first, second, and third prize. Third prize was given to the best visualization. So this was something simple, well thought through, communicating something complex effectively. There was the best new insight. So the judges for this hack were, they were the fleet manager and the energy manager for Northumbrian Water. So they knew their stuff about this field, and this was really looking for something which the judges didn't know, something which they hadn't known, and really surprised them. And of course, first prize went to the best overall solution. So for this one, they were really looking for something which was an actionable solution. It was a practical suggestion and represented good value for money, which could then be taken on to actually deliver. So the best visualization, any techies in the crowd will hopefully recognize Angular and Mapbox as some pretty cool web development technologies. So that was the tools that these guys used for the best visualization. This team actually came up with a little app that would allow an operations manager to select an appropriate vehicle for an appropriate job, considering the vehicle availability, the location of the job, and of course the potential emissions element of that. Best new insight, I always find amusing, is a bit of a step change from the best visualization. You've got something that's come out of our studio here. So here you've got the best new insight, which was a powerful insight. The insight being that 81% of CO2 emissions are made by journeys of 90 miles or less. So that this really did surprise the judges, because going into it, their sort of preconception was that the big problem would actually be the longer journeys. And what this showed is actually that most of your savings can be made on those shorter journeys. And critically, journeys of 90 miles or less are actually much more palatable to be done by an electric vehicle. So it does really prove that the scope of introducing electric vehicles, there's a lot of value to be had there. Which is where the best overall solution focused. It was on that electric vehicle rollout. So the best overall solution, we're looking really at when and where EVs are appropriate for jobs and the cost model associated with that. So what they came up with was a red, amber, green rating. So they could look at basically all the vehicles in the fleet, all the vehicle roles, and assess how appropriate they would be to be replaced by an EV based on the sort of distances they're traveling. They also, of course, rolled in the cost benefits and looked at things you could do with the other vehicles in the fleet as well, which I'll come on to. It all came together in Power BI. You can see here they've broken it down by department. You can look at the savings and you can see the red, amber, green scores for different departments, so you know where to focus your replacement efforts. But as I'm sure you can imagine, a lot of teams actually did come up with something similar to this during the hack. There was one element that the winning team provided, which was a differentiator. That was this. So imagine the situation where you've got two emitting vehicles, two petrol vehicles. But one of them is very fuel inefficient, but it's traveling long distances, so it might not be appropriate for an electric vehicle. But the other one might be a really fuel efficient vehicle and it's traveling shorter distances. And really the game changer thing was to think as those vehicles as being movable between the roles, separating the vehicles and the roles. So you can say, replace that higher CO2 emitting vehicle with the lower one and bring an electric vehicle for the role which the electric vehicle can do, which is what made the difference. Actually, this one idea went on to agreed to be developed. I'm actually in a workshop tomorrow about next steps on this and making this a reality. So again, it's a really exciting idea that's come out of one of these workshops, which is going on to be something to make a difference, which is fantastic to be a part of. So in terms of my final thoughts, I think despite the current restrictions, I think as Paul was saying at the start, the appetite for things like this, for data, for hackathons is, stronger than ever. And it's fantastic to see the engagement that we've seen on these events. And it's certainly not a myth that there is value that comes out of these. Thinking back to the Welsh Water hack when we came up with the idea for the schools projects, it didn't win, but it went on to become a reality. And I'm sure that out of that hack, there were other projects which didn't win or might not even been aware of, happened in other tents, which actually went on to make a difference. So I think the value of bringing people together in this way is very clear, and it's always great to be part of. So thank you very much. That's all the slides I've got, but I'll be happy to take any questions.
I've never taken part in a hackathon before, but you mentioned that one of the challenges was around giving the data to the people joining the hackathon. How difficult was it to get hold of that data and provide it to the hackathon?
It's so that's the hidden bit behind the scenes. It's actually getting it ready in the first place can be a lot of effort. I wasn't quite as much involved from the water consumption hack with getting the data, because we had obviously data sets from 3 different companies we're trying to bring together, which in itself was a challenge coordinating it. But with the Northumbrian Water hack, the net zero hack, I was involved in trying to get that data together. The big problem we had there, I remember, was making sure it was anonymized as well, because obviously we sent them actual job data, so you could look at what these vehicles were doing, and these vehicles tend to go back to the driver's home overnight and things like this. So it was trying to find a way to get that data across in a way which was valuable. It was taking out that personal information, but without losing the information about how far they're traveling, and collating that all together in time. Yeah, was absolutely a challenge and should not be underestimated.
In terms of teams, do people get together into teams before the hack starts, or are the teams put together when they arrive?
Yeah, so often people, we run these hacks, maybe with the exception of the water consumption hack, they're part of a larger event. So there will be people that are signed up in advance. There may be people that just wander in on the day, particularly when you've got a physical tent in the real world, maybe slightly less so on the internet. Often people come with preformed teams. So like the RPS team that won the water consumption hack, they were Team RPS. They came to represent RPS and be a team. Sometimes you get people that just turn up on their own and need to be found teams. Obviously, again, this is something which is more difficult to do remotely, making sure everybody feels welcome and part of the team. But having both times sort of just been allocated and find my way. I think we managed it okay. Everybody's sort of understanding the problem. I was thrown in with the Welsh Water guys and got to know them. So always a great opportunity to mix people up. We always try and encourage people to mix up, especially when it's real. I say real, a physical event where people are actually there. It's much easier to encourage people to mix up, because then you get different perspectives on the problem rather than sort of tunnel vision.
I've found it can be difficult to get buy in from organizations to commit their time and expense to sponsoring or running hacks, as they're worried that they won't be ready to take an idea forward. Amy has a really progressive approach to this. What do you think is the best way to engage with organizations to run effective hacks?
Yeah, I think it's a big question for sure, isn't it? And it is definitely the kinds of questions that are always spinning in my mind with hacks. And I think for sure, maybe it's worth, if you drop me an email afterwards, we could catch up, and maybe I'll get some of the people that know slightly more about hackers than I do in as well, and we can have a think about it. But I'd certainly say, in terms of making the outcomes of the hacks a reality, a big part for me would be framing it right. It's making sure from the inception of the hack that actually the problem that you're trying to solve is framed in the right way, that the solution that comes along is one which you're actually going to want to roll with. I mean, the Northumbrian Water one, I think, is a great example, because decarbonising the fleet by 2027 is something that the business have committed to, something that they want to happen, and there's budget behind. So putting a hack around it meant that absolutely anything that came out of it, they really wanted to get their hands on. So it's a problem they really didn't know how they wanted to solve, and there's a real pressing need to solve it. Obviously, that's not always the case. So I think it's really about framing the problem the right way.